with so many contractual issues that involve so many bold-faced name NFL players going on in training camp. Again, earlier on in the show, we had Dan Quinn of the Atlanta Falcons, Julio Jones not holding out. We also had the head of NFL refs, Al River, on here on the show. That was a fascinating conversation. Joining us once again here on the show to talk about these contracts that are outstanding, the former CEO of the Cleveland Browns and senior vice president of the Philadelphia Eagles, Joe Banner, right here back on the show. How you been, Joe?
I've been doing great. Good to be with you. I'm keeping some good company today.
You know what? I'm excited. It's that time of year, right? I mean, what did training camp mean to you in the front office, Joe?
You know, the hope abounds. You know, one of the most fun days of the whole year was the first day of training camp. I'll tell you a real quick story. I took my son to training camp one year. The first day, he was 5. And he tugged on my leg about 5 minutes into practice and said, "Dad, is this what you call work?"
Even a 5-year-old got that, huh?
5-year-old trying to get it out.
Picked it up that it's the toy department of professions. So Melvin Gordon, let's start with him first, with the Los Angeles Chargers. Tom Telesco doesn't appear to be budging. He said yesterday, as much as he loves Melvin Gordon, he's going to be a Charger. He's not playing anywhere else. Phillip Rivers on the first day of training camp said that we love Melvin, but it's a deep position group, and even he kind of put that off to the side. What do you think he has at all that might be leverage, Joe?
You know, he doesn't have much is unfortunately the answer in his particular case. Now, we're seeing players realize in general they have a lot more leverage they've been using. But there's a couple of things. The Chargers are one of the strongest organizations in the league and kind of sticking to what they believe in, staying strong, and not allowing a precedent to get set that could be used against them with other players. Combine that with the position he's at and the other players they got on their roster, you know, I have a hard time seeing him really get what he wants. Now, could they do a deal in the end that maybe somewhere in between? You know, hopefully reasonable minds prevail and that's what happens. But he's dealing with an organization that is a very tough organization to do this kind of thing with and prevail.
Well, so what is it about the running back position? I know we talk about this almost endlessly, but here's another instance of a young man coming out of Wisconsin, drafted very high. He's put his body on the line. He has, for the first few years of his career, put out, when he is healthy, some serious statistics and output. Why does this seem to keep happening in the NFL, Joe?
So there's only one position, if you really think about this. By the way, the discussion that running back's not important, and I was running a team for 18 years that never paid a running back a ton of money. And I strongly believe that most of the time you shouldn't be paying a running back a ton of money. But the reason this happens is not because running backs aren't important. It's because it's the only position in the entire game where the supply and demand favors the team. There are actually more players good enough to win a championship at this position than there are teams in the league. So the running backs have a disadvantage because the career's shortened and the rookie pool is what it is, and combine it with the fact that you have an abundance of talent at this position. There's no other position you can look at, even unimportant positions, where you would say there are more good players at this position. I'm defining good as good enough to win a championship with this caliber player at this position. The only place where the supply and demand is out of whack in favor of the team is running back. So they get stuck in this thing with the rookie pool, the shortness of the career, and a position in which there's just more good players than the league needs. So it's a very tough place to get the fair treatment for what you're worth to that team at that moment.
And Adam Schefter, latest report about Gordon is anywhere between $10 to $11 million a year has been offered to him by the Chargers. What do you make of those numbers in that report?
You know, depending upon the detail of the structure and the guarantees, that's about where I would have expected them to go, and I think he should take the deal. I really do. I don't see him getting them pushing much beyond that. I don't think they should. And assuming the guarantees are right, so this is not some, fake-looking $10, $11 million average. He's actually going to collect that for a period of time. I think that's where the deal should be, and if I were him, I would take it.
Former Eagles president, senior vice president was his first title when he was in the front office there with the Philadelphia Eagles, and CEO of the Cleveland Browns. Joe Banner joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Last time we chatted was after Carson Wentz got done by the Eagles early, and you said that the Cowboys habitually do stuff late. Here we are. eve of training camp, first practice for the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody there, and Dak not signed. Joe, what in the world do you think the Joneses' plan is for Dak?
I think the Jones will end up giving Zach a very strong deal in the Gurley range, and he will take it. But just think about this. If I'm Dak Prescott's agent, if I'm Amari Cooper's agent, and as everybody knows, the list is longer than that. They have a list of half a dozen players that are as good young players as there are on any team in the league. What happens when they give in? Amari Cooper's not going to leave camp, but should he? Should Prescott walk out of camp? I mean, people understand from the team side, if you're in the front office, these are really, really tough decisions. But people are predictable, and the history says that Jerry will stay tough for a while, and then he'll get this deal done because they have a real chance to win the Super Bowl this year. And more than any other player that's holding out right now, in my opinion, other than maybe Michael Thomas, this holdout has a chance to affect who wins the Super Bowl.
You're talking about Zeke, not Dak. You're talking about Zeke Elliott right here.
Yes, I'm talking about Zeke.
Okay, so you think that Jerry and Stephen Jones are going to put on the table something for him that's akin to the Gurley contract? That you
I do. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen before the season starts. That's my prediction.
Okay, and what about Dak Prescott?
I think they'll get Dak done. I don't think they have any choice. And listen, if one side is at 30 and the other side is at 32 million, and you're talking about the quarterback of the team, and I'm making up what I'm guessing is likelihood of the gap, it becomes such a small percentage of the deal you make a deal. Now, if you're Michael Thomas and one's at 18 and one's at 20 or 21, that's actually a meaningful percentage of the deal. That's 20% of the deal. Whereas the numbers we just used on Dak, it's 6% of the deal. So you find a way to get those kind of deals done, especially when it's a quarterback.
So by the time Dallas kicks off the season against the Giants, week 1, do you think all 3 of these players are done?
I do. I think Dak, I think Zeke, and I think Amari Cooper all have deals done before the first game of the season.
No kidding. Well, then obviously that would be exactly what Cowboys fans would want or need. But I imagine it wouldn't come without the drama of who gets done first. I think, as you intimated at the top of this conversation here.
Yeah, and if I was Dallas, I don't want to send the message that I'm rewarding a holdout. So I'm running over to Dak's agent, or I'm running over to Amari Cooper's agent in the next week or so. Mm-hmm. And I'm really trying to get a deal done with one of those guys. And then I'm calling up Zeke and I'm saying, listen, come into camp, be here for a week, do what you do. We'll try to minimize the risk of injury. And then let's sit down and have a hard conversation, see if we can get something done. Just for the optics of it. Yeah, I'm worried about the 53 other agents I have that are going to make my team in the first game of the season. And, listen, agents hate when you say that. They hate when you talk about presidents. They just want to focus on their team. But believe me, the smart teams worry about the president because every agent is watching every thing you do, and every player is watching what every other player gets. That's why, like, what Green Bay just did to Mitch Daniels, it's people are like, well, what were they supposed to? No, they just did something that's going to be really hurtful because of the way he's respected. This is the captain of the team, sitting in the locker room, has been a great player for a long time. All of these messages matter.
Well, and that's another thing I was about to bring up with you, Joe Banner, former front office executive here on the Rich Eisen Show. You've been very vocal about veterans that were just cut on the eve of training camp. Mike Daniels, you just mentioned of the Green Bay Packers being one. What goes into this decision, do you think? Why does it happen
right now? I'm giving the team the benefit of the doubt, and this is hard for me to do in the circumstance. There's some legitimate concern about waiving a player early who has an injury and can make a claim against you. That said, there are ways to communicate with the player and the agent and have a situation where you're not cutting somebody who's been working for the team for all these years, playing so effectively, captain of your team, the night before you're reporting to training camp. And to isolate that decision just in that moment and not think about the repercussions to the rest of your roster, the feelings in the locker room. Every player on that team feels more vulnerable than they did a week ago. This is a really good player, an A-plus personality, captain of the team, and frankly, real world, $8 million is a ton of money. $8 million in the NFL today is not a huge amount of money. And you can't find a way to manage that situation so it feels good for everybody. Because when I was running the Eagles, I had a reputation for being tough. I think people thought tough but fair, hopefully, but tough. But the thought of cutting a player on the eve of reporting to training camp, I can tell you, in the 14 years Andy Reid and I were running the Eagles, that conversation never took place once. There was no circumstance in which we would do that. You know, you may keep a player through the draft. Maybe he can be traded. Maybe there's some other issues, like in this case, he's recovering from an injury. But once you start to get through June and July, and by the way, I understand they were allowed to do what they did, but there's a difference between being allowed to do something and it's the right thing to do. So nobody's questioning. They had the right to do what they did. There's absolutely nothing that limits this. But is it the right thing to do, even from a business perspective? Is it the right thing to do? I mean, for me, that's just an unambiguous no. It's a mistake.
And I'm assuming Joe Banner, Michael Thomas gets done in New Orleans, right?
Yeah.
That's no question
Deservedly
about
so.
that. Right.
I mean, he'll get a deal, and he'll be the new highest-paid wide receiver in the league, which is what happens when the most recent top-tier player signs.
And what happens when with wide receivers who have contracts that are now surpassed by Michael Thomas, and then their guaranteed money is running out on the contract that they currently have? They're
all frustrated, and this is what's leading to some of these holdouts. The players, some are valid, some aren't. The players have a long list of grievances at the moment, from cap money carried over to lack of guarantees to salaries for positions that aren't catching up with the increases in the cap. They have a long list of grievances. So you're seeing players become more aggressive and willing to take a stand and, frankly, leverage their services. I hear people all the time talking about how, what leverage do they have, or what leverage does the union have? No, you can create a perceived leverage by withholding your services. That's tremendous leverage. That's all the leverage you should need. I think this really flipped with Mac last year, where everybody said, whoa, he not only stayed strong, he planned for it for a year. He actually had to get to a new team to get what he deserved, and by just being, immovable. So, yeah, Michael Thomas gets done, and it should be done, and Julio Jones may get done just after or just before, and then you'll have Amari Cooper snuggle in right below those guys' deals, and then Tyreek Hill will try to get a deal. It's just going to be one big domino.
Joe Banner, former Eagles president and front office executive. A few minutes left with you, sir. So looking at all 32 rosters right now, Joe, okay, look at I know you don't have them all in front of you, but just based off the top of your head, which roster to win now and for the next few years or foreseeable future, which one would you choose? I want that one, Joe Banner. Which one is that one?
I hate when I look like I'm unobjective, and my answer is going to look terribly unobjective, but my answer is clearly and emphatically the Philadelphia Eagles.
Why is that?
Well, you got a strong coaching staff. You got a strong front office. You have a reasonable cap situation. I think you have the best young quarterback in the league. I understand there's concerns about can he stay healthy. And you have the short-term ability to dominate both lines of scrimmage. So those are all the boxes I check as to who are the best teams now. And as I look at the age and the contracts of those players and who's likely to sustain that for the future, and I can't come up with a team that I think is stronger on those things. Those are my priorities than the Eagles. Well,
it's funny, some of my listeners and viewers might have thought that you were about to choose your other former team in the Cleveland Browns because of how much they're hyped. What do you think of them, Joe?
So I think the Browns obviously have much more talent. They've had a very long time, and they have a challenging dynamic. I think that the defense will be a little bit challenged to stay as good as it was last year, even with the additions that they made. And I worry a little bit about their offensive line. I'm not excited about either tackle, and they traded away their starting guard, and I'm not sure they have a replacement. So I think the Browns are much better. Conversation about them making the playoffs is completely legitimate. But I still think they have weaknesses in a couple of areas that are important to me that doesn't put them at the very, very top group of teams.
Last one for you, Joe Banner. I know you're a sports fan generally, not just a former NFL executive. I wonder what you think of what went down in the NBA over the last few weeks, where players like Paul George, Anthony Davis told their teams, "I want out," and yes, their general managers and front office executives got huge hauls in regard to coughing them up, but general managers didn't just say no, sort of like what Tom Telesco is doing right now with Melvin Gordon. I wonder what your thoughts are as a former NFL executive on this front, Joe.
Well, first of all, fascinating to watch. 5 years ago, if you'd asked me what was happening over the last 4 years, I would have said the NBA will probably drop in some popularity because so many fans will be hopeless, and the opposite has happened. And it's a phenomenal example of what we're starting to see in the NFL, of players realizing that the notion that they don't have leverage, well, you actually have to have leverage versus perceived leverage. And leverage is withholding your services. I mean, if you want to see it play out in real life, you're watching it in the NBA, and the NFL, and I said this last time I was on your show, is going to become much more like, it's not going to become like, it's become more like the NBA than what we're used to seeing.
What do you mean?
Well, the players are going to start to use the leverage that they have to make demands and be treated more fairly and get what they deserve. The players, listen, if you took the average position pay right now, at the rate that the cap is going up, there are almost no positions where the rate of pay has gone up as fast as the cap increase. Some have actually caught up in the last 12 months. Up until then, I could have made that as a blanket statement. Now some are actually catching up. And they're catching up because of the Macs and the Donalds and the Wilsons, and now it will be the Thomases, and then it will be the Zeke Elliott's. They understand how to, the power that they have. They understand when and how to try to use it more effectively. And it's going to push everything up. You're going to see teams able to carry over less money than they have been. For years now, the teams are carrying over massive amounts of money. I think that will get addressed in the CBA too. But why should a player be sitting there taking a deal for, let's say, $15 million a year when he thinks he's worth $18 because he hopes the team is going to spend on the rest of the roster? And what they do instead is they carry it over to the next year. They're really waking up to all of this. The players are talking to each other. There are more outside people talking to the players. The players are watching what's going on in the NBA. They have this long list of grievances that we talked about briefly earlier. And they're like, you know what, it's the movie network. I'm not taking it anymore. I'm going to stand up for myself, and I'm going to get what I believe I deserve. Now, some of the players, like I was not a fan of what Bell did last year. Some of the players will overshoot in trying to stand up for themselves. And some players will get what they deserve when they stand up for themselves. And the agents are going to play a big role in this, hopefully helping the players understand, when am I overshooting? When am I getting what I deserve? When am I picking a fight with a team that I actually have a chance of winning? If I was advising Gordon, I would say, listen, just go to camp, go quietly, do everything well. Let Zeke get his deal done, even if it's late in camp, and then let's go back and reapproach them. Because the Chargers aren't going to cave. That's just not what they do. So I think he's putting himself in a one-down position, as we would say, in a negotiation.
Joe Banner, thanks for the time. Have a great rest of your summer. We'll chat shortly. Thanks again for your insights.
Thanks, Rich.
You got it. That's Joe Banner, at Joe Banner 13. Great follow on Twitter.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.